Hi, this is Linda Ellers from Great Glass Galore, and I'm going to show you how to load your project into your kiln and show you a firing schedule for that project. So remember, our beginner project is over here. This is our 8x8 square slumper, so the first thing we're going to need to do is full fuse. And I'm using my Paragon Fusion 16 kiln. It has a 15 by 15 inch kiln shelf. And here's some the basic programs I use for that kiln. It only holds 4 programs. So these are my basic schedules, and then I have to vary them a little bit. But this first one is full fuse for a 12 by 12 inch plate, but this second one is my full fuse for an 8 by 8 inch square plate. So we're going to use program 2. And when you look at kilns, they're set up so you have the number of segments. You have your rate per hour, your temperature change per hour, your target temperature for that segment, and then your hold time for that segment. So in this case, we have 6 segments here. Segment 1 is where our glass is a solid, and we want to heat it as slow as you can so that it doesn't crack or break from thermal shock. So in this case, I'm going 400 degrees an hour to a target temp of 1050 degrees, and I'm holding it for 25 minutes so that the glass all reaches 1050 degrees before I go to the next segment. So if you look up at the 12 by 12, this first segment, I'm only heating 250 degrees an hour. So that is because the project is bigger. Okay. So now we're going to go on to segment 2, where we have to worry about bubbles. Usually if the project is 8 by 8, the second layer is full, I worry about bubbles. If the project is smaller, 6 by 6 or smaller, I don't worry about bubbles, and I skip this segment. But in this segment, we're going 250 degrees an hour, so even slower than the first one, to 1250 degrees where the glass starts to stick together. And then I'm holding it for 25 minutes, so the glass, again, reaches 1250 degrees before I move on to the next segment. Then I can heat it as fast as possible. This kiln only heats, its max heating temperature rate is about 500 degrees an hour, so I'm going to do 500 degrees an hour till it hits the full fuse temperature, and that's 1440 degrees on this kiln. Going to hold it for 25 minutes. If you want, you can flash cool it to try and either cool the project faster or just to eliminate devitrification. 96 doesn't have any devitrification problems that I know of, so I usually just skip this temperature. I don't even open the kiln. I just let this whole program run. And so once you're at 1440 and you hold it, you can actually say rate per hour is full, which means cool as fast as possible. Some kilns say 9999 instead of, they don't have a full option, to the annealing point of 950 degrees. So this is where the glass goes from liquid to solid. So you want to make sure all the glass goes from liquid to solid, all the molecules line up at the same time. So you need to go to that annealing point and then hold it for a while so the glass all becomes solid at the same time. This is holding it for 30 minutes. A bigger project like your full fuse, your 12 by 12 will be 60 minutes. So again, the bigger and thicker the project, the longer you hold it at the annealing temperature. And then I'm going to segment 5, where I'm going through the strain point. So I'm going slow again, 150 degrees an hour to 800 degrees, and I'm holding for 10 minutes. These red numbers are if your system 90. So the 950 is for 96, the 900 is for system 90, the same with the 800 versus 700. Then now the glass is fully solid in segment 6, so I'm going to go back to my 400 degrees an hour down to 200 degrees or room temperature to 0. And I know this kiln, once it gets to 200 degrees, it can't, with the lid shut, it doesn't cool faster than 400 degrees, so I'm not worried about going down to like 70 degrees or room temperature or anything like that. Okay. Again, very technical. This is very technical, but you can get kilns that have pre-programmed programs in it. You can tell the kiln, are you firing something small, medium, or large? Am I slumping it? Am I tacking it? Am I full fusing it? And then how long do I want to hold at the tie range? So there are some programs there where you don't need to know all these technical details. Okay. So now we're going to go to loading the kiln. This is my Paragon 14. So it's got a ceramic kiln shelf in it that's set up on kiln posts. So you don't want your kiln shelf to sit directly on the kiln because you want all that air that's heating to circulate around the kiln shelf. You don't, if you put the kiln shelf directly on the kiln, the middle of the shelf will heat unevenly, then the outside you'll get breakage in your glass. The other thing is the glass gets very tacky and can stick to the shelf, can stick to the bricks. So you generally want to protect your kiln shelf with either kiln wash or thin fire shelf paper. I'm going to be using thin fire shelf paper in this case. You can use kiln wash, but you have to paint it on. You can use it once or twice. Excuse me, and then you have to then you'd have to scrub it off and start over. So it's easier to use thin fire shelf paper. The other thing you do with a new kiln is to put kiln wash on the bricks on the inside. So if you do have an accident and the glass breaks or it heats too much and rolls off the shelf, your bricks don't get damaged. So I'm using Bullseye thin fire shelf paper. I like it because it's got marks on the back and it makes it easy for me to cut it to the size I need to fire my piece. In this case, you want your shelf paper a ½ inch bigger around than your project. So my project's 8 by 8, so this is a 9 by 9 piece. So I'm going to put that in here. And then I'm going to put my project on top of that. Okay. And then I'm going to close the lid. Okay. The other thing I should talk about is glass kilns are different than ceramic kilns. You'll notice they're shallower. And if they're a bigger kiln, they'll have side heating elements and top heating elements so that the heat in the kiln heats more evenly. If you have a ceramic kiln, sometimes you can get away if it's got convection baking, then it circulates the air better. But really, you have to be really careful in having the air in the kiln heat evenly, otherwise you get that breakage we talked about. So now we're onto this controller here. So that's the nice thing about glass kilns is they come with a controller, so you can set up this complicated program I just talked about and walk away from the kiln. A bigger kiln will have a numeric pad, which is also easier than this controller. But this is a really great kiln with a big kiln shelf that runs on 120 volts, which is really hard to find. So in this case, I'm doing that program too I just showed you. So I'm hitting the start-stop button. I'm on program 2, PR02. If I hit the next button, it's going to start going through the program and telling me what I'm doing. So we're at ramp 1, 400 degrees. And then the target temperature for that is 1050, so degrees Fahrenheit. Hold time, 25 minutes. Then it's going to go to ramp 2, the segment 2. It's going to heat 250 degrees an hour to 1250, hold time 25. So I keep going, you see that? 500 to full fuse at 1440, hold 25. Now it's going to cool as fast as possible to the kneeling temperature of 950, hold it for 30. 150 degrees an hour to the strain point of 800, hold for 10 minutes. Cool at 400 degrees an hour, the glass is a solid again, down to 200 degrees, hold 0. Ramp 7, nothing in ramp 7, it's a 0, so if I hit next, it'll do start. And now it's going to run, and it's probably going to take overnight to heat and cool. So we'll come back tomorrow and take a look at this. The other thing you have to worry about is the glues. The glues and the thin fire shelf paper start to give off gases. Gases at around 500 degrees, so you actually want to vent. So you don't have to vent the kiln, but you have to worry about the fumes in your house or wherever you are. They're not good for you. So usually people like to keep their kiln in a garage, out on a porch. I have mine in my basement, and I have an overhead heavy-duty filter that I turn on in that range. I've got little smoke absorbers with charcoal filters from stained glass that I set up in front of the kiln. And I also have windows where I can cross-vent in the basement and open them across the room. So depending on what I'm using in the kiln, the thin fire shelf paper, the glues I'm using, I'm more careful when I vent. So let's end this video. We'll come back to tomorrow and I'll show you how to slump the project.